Hey, so tonight we're going to talk about what people ate to survive in the Old West, and let me tell you, it's going to make you real grateful for that fridge full of food you've got just a few steps away. We're heading back to a time when there were no grocery stores, no refrigerators, and definitely no DoorDash, just miles of untamed wilderness and the constant gnawing question, what am I going to eat today? Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. All right, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to the American frontier in the mid-1800s, and trust me, you're going to be real grateful for that mattress by the time we're done. So congratulations, you just woke up in 1848, somewhere along the Oregon Trail. The rough canvas of your wagon cover flaps in the morning breeze. Your back aches from another night of sleeping on the hard ground. The smell of wood smoke fills your nostrils as the camp cook has already started breakfast. Your stomach growls, a feeling you've gotten pretty used to these past few months. The journey west isn't what you expected. Back in Independence, Missouri, when you first joined the wagon train, everything seemed so promising. Go west, they said. Land of opportunity, they said. Nobody mentioned that you'd be eating the same monotonous meals day after day, until the mere thought of beans would make your stomach turn. Nobody warned you that you'd be packing nearly 400 pounds of bacon for a family of 4, and they definitely didn't tell you that sometimes you'd be so desperate for food that you'd eat things you never imagined putting in your mouth. Your wagon is packed to the brim with food supplies because you had to think ahead. This journey is going to take you about 2,000 miles and anywhere from 4 to 6 months if you're lucky. There's no popping into a store along the way, at least not reliably. You've got to carry everything you need and make it last. So, what exactly did you bring? Let's take inventory. For each adult in your family, you've packed about 200 pounds of flour, 30 pounds of hardtack, basically rock-hard crackers that'll break your teeth if you're not careful, 100 pounds of bacon, 10 pounds of coffee, 20 pounds of sugar, and 10 pounds of salt. You've also got cornmeal, dried beans, dried apples and peaches, rice, tea, and lard, about 80 pounds of it. Feel the weight of all that food. 2,000 pounds of supplies for a family of 4 loaded into a wagon that's already struggling with the basic equipment you need. The wooden wheels creak under the strain, your oxen strain with every step, and you know that despite all this food, you might still go hungry. Morning comes early on the trail, around 4 a.m. You can feel the damp chill in your bones as you crawl out from under your blankets. Camp cooks are already stoking fires, the orange glow flickering across tired faces. The sound of coffee being ground by hand is almost musical, a rhythmic grinding that promises a bit of comfort in this uncomfortable world. The aroma of coffee brewing over an open fire is probably the best part of your morning. Real coffee is a luxury out here, and it might not last the whole journey. The pioneers around you are already talking about coffee substitutes they'll use when the real stuff runs out. You've heard that some use chicory root or dandelion root. Others roast acorns, grind them up, and brew a dark liquid that looks like coffee but tastes nothing like it. But the oddest substitute you've heard of is sweet potato coffee. Seriously, the pioneers peel sweet potatoes, cook them, mash them, and dry them into patties. Then they mix these patties with rye flour, dry them in an oven if they're lucky enough to have one, and grind them into powder. A few tablespoons of this mixed with a small amount of real coffee makes a drink that, well, let's be honest, is barely tolerable. But out here, barely tolerable is sometimes as good as it gets. Your first meal of the day is simple. Cornmeal mush or cornmeal cakes called Johnny cakes, maybe some salt pork if you're lucky, and coffee. You can feel the rough texture of the cornmeal between your teeth, the slightly gritty sensation as you chew. It's filling at least, but not exactly delicious. You watch the other families eating the same meal they've eaten for weeks now, trying to muster enthusiasm for another day of the same. After breakfast, you break camp and hit the trail. The sun climbs higher and the day gets hotter. Your clothes stick to your skin with sweat. The oxen plod forward, one heavy step after another, pulling your wagon over rocky terrain that threatens to break an axle with every bump. Your water barrel sloshes with each jolt, a precious resource that you ration carefully. Finding fresh water is a daily concern, and when you do find a river or stream, it's often muddy. Pioneers use cornmeal to filter out the silt, but you still end up drinking more dirt than you'd like. Around midday, the wagon train stops for a brief rest, what the trail leaders call nooning. Lunch is cold and quick, maybe leftover cornbread from breakfast, some beans, cold of course, dried beef or hardtack. You can feel the hardtack scraping against the roof of your mouth as you try to soften it with water or coffee. It's like eating a brick, but it travels well and lasts forever, so complaints are few. The day drags on, mile after dusty mile. Your back aches from walking, because yes, most pioneers walked rather than rode in the wagons. Those wagons were packed so full of supplies that there was barely room for the youngest children and the elderly. Everyone else walked, sometimes 15 to 20 miles a day. Feel the soreness in your feet, the way each step sends a jolt of pain up your legs. The dust coats your throat, making you thirsty, but you sip water sparingly. There's no telling when you'll find the next clean source. As the sun begins to dip toward the horizon, the wagon master signals to make camp. There's a collective sigh of relief as the day's journey ends. Bodies that have been moving since dawn now crave rest, but there's work to be done first. Fires need to be built, but there's a problem. You're crossing the Great Plains and trees are scarce. Instead, everyone gathers buffalo chips, dried buffalo dung that burns surprisingly well. Yes, you're cooking your food over animal poop. That's frontier life for you. The evening meal is the largest of the day, but still simple. Beans, yes, more beans, bacon and bread. If someone got lucky hunting during the day, there might be fresh meat, rabbit, deer or even buffalo if you're crossing the plains at the right time, but don't count on it. Game was often scarce along the well-travelled routes, with thousands of pioneers coming through each season and scaring away the wildlife. You watch as the camp cook tends a large pot of beans that's been simmering since morning. The rich, savoury smell makes your mouth water after a long day of travel. Nearby, someone is frying salt pork in a cast-iron skillet, the fat popping and sizzling over the fire. The women of various families are baking bread in Dutch ovens, cast-iron pots placed directly in the coals, with more coals piled on the lid to create an oven-like environment. The smell of freshly baked bread fills the air, momentarily masking the less pleasant odours of the camp, the unwashed bodies, the oxen, the latrines dug a short distance away. You can almost taste that bread already, imagining the way the crust will crackle between your teeth, giving way to the soft interior. Maybe there's even a bit of precious butter churned from the milk of the cow that some families brought along, tied to the back of their wagon so the rocking motion during travel would do the churning work. After dinner, as darkness falls completely, you might indulge in one small luxury, a dessert. Not the kind of dessert you're thinking of. There are no chocolate chip cookies or ice cream out here. Instead, you might have a spoonful of molasses or a piece of dried fruit soaked in water to soften it, or if you're really fortunate, maybe a slice of vinegar pie. Yes, vinegar pie. It sounds strange, but when fresh fruit is scarce, pioneers got creative. The tart taste of apple cider vinegar mixed with sugar, spices and eggs made a filling that wasn't too far off from apple or lemon pie. You close your eyes as you take a bite, trying to imagine it's a real fruit pie like your mother used to make back home. It takes some imagination, but out here, imagination is sometimes all you have. As the campfires burn down to embers, conversations quiet. Someone might play a harmonica or fiddle softly, the notes floating on the night air. Your body feels heavy with exhaustion, but your mind is still racing, thinking about tomorrow's journey and the countless miles still ahead. You crawl back under your blankets, the ground hard beneath you. The night is filled with sounds, the howl of distant wolves, the snorting of the oxen, the rustle of someone turning restlessly in their bedroll nearby. You drift off to sleep, dreaming of the fresh vegetables you'd plant once you reached your destination, imagining a proper kitchen with a real stove instead of a campfire, thinking of the day when beans wouldn't be on the menu 3 times a day. But the reality is, even once pioneers reached their destination and established homesteads, food remained a challenge. The first year in a new settlement was often called the starving time. You had to build shelter first, then clear land for planting, and even once crops were in, you had to wait for the harvest. Many settlers found themselves eating strange foods just to survive those early days. Take, for instance, the strange foods pioneers might eat when they were short on traditional ingredients. Calf's foot jelly sounds like something from a bizarre cooking show, but it was a common pioneer dessert. They'd boil several calves' feet to create gelatin, since Jell-O wouldn't be invented until 1897, then mix it with eggs, lemon, sugar, and spices. Some recipes even called for adding white wine and crushed eggshells. The result was a wobbly, sweet treat that satisfied the craving for dessert when nothing else was available. Or consider the resourcefulness of pioneers who couldn't get wheat flour. They'd gather acorns, roast them to remove the natural bitterness, then grind them into a fine meal that could be used to make bread and other baked goods. The resulting bread wasn't exactly like what you'd get from wheat flour, but it kept hunger at bay. Then there were the truly desperate times when pioneers would eat whatever they could hunt or trap. Squirrels were a common target, small enough that they weren't too difficult to catch, but with enough meat to make the effort worthwhile. Hunters would try to shoot them in a way that preserved as much meat as possible on their tiny frames. For those really tough times, there was even skunk. Yes, skunk meat. Pioneers would carefully remove the scent glands before cooking the animal, and the meat was said to be light and well-flavoured, even better than raccoon or possum. It's hard to imagine being hungry enough to consider eating skunk, but frontier survival didn't leave much room for pickiness. On the trail, jackrabbits were another common food source, plentiful and easy to catch, making them a quick, hearty meal. But there was a danger in eating too much rabbit meat and nothing else. Pioneers discovered the hard way that subsisting solely on rabbit led to what they called rabbit starvation, what we now know as protein poisoning. The meat was too lean, lacking the fat and other nutrients needed for survival. It's a strange paradox. You could eat your fill of rabbit and still be effectively starving. But the most infamous meat option on the frontier had to be the prairie or mountain oysters, better known today as Rocky Mountain oysters. These weren't seafood at all, but bull testicles that cowboys and ranchers would skin, batter, and deep fry. In the Old West, where nothing went to waste, even these unusual parts of the animal found their way to the dinner plate. Cowboys considered them a delicacy, often preparing them right after castrating the young bulls. As you lie there on the cold ground of the Oregon Trail, drifting between sleep and wakefulness, these are the realities of the journey you've undertaken. Food isn't just a pleasure or a comfort, it's survival. Every meal is precious, every ingredient is measured and rationed with care. The steady breathing of your family around you becomes a comforting rhythm. The weight of your blanket presses you into the ground, reminding you of your physical presence in this harsh but beautiful landscape. Tomorrow will bring another day of the same foods, the same challenges, the same slow progress westward. Your muscles begin to relax as sleep approaches. The aches of the day's journey fade as your body surrenders to exhaustion. In your last conscious moments, you wonder what breakfast will bring. Probably cornmeal mush again, or maybe Johnny cakes. Always with that precious coffee that you savour more with each passing day, knowing it might not last. And as you finally drift off to sleep, there's a strange comfort in the simplicity of it all. When survival is your primary concern, the small pleasures, a hot cup of coffee, a successful hunt, bread baked to perfection in a Dutch oven, become moments of pure joy. The pioneers may not have had much variety in their diet, but they understood something that's easy to forget in our world of abundance. The profound gratitude for having enough to eat, whatever form it might take. The rhythm of your breathing slows, the sounds of the camp fade. Sleep comes at last, carrying you away from the hardships of the trail, at least until dawn breaks and the journey continues. Morning comes too soon. The eastern sky just barely lightens as someone shakes your shoulder gently. Time to get up. Another day on the trail. Your body protests as you force yourself to sit up, every muscle stiff from yesterday's journey and the hard ground beneath you. The air is crisp, almost cold, and dew has settled on your blankets during the night. You shiver as you pull on your boots. All around you, the camp is stirring to life. The soft murmur of voices, the clinking of cooking pots, the crackle of new fires being built. You can smell coffee brewing already, that rich aroma that promises a small comfort in the long day ahead. Your stomach growls impatiently. Food on the trail follows the rhythm of the seasons, just like it would back home. But out here, with limited supplies and unpredictable conditions, the seasonal changes hit harder. During these summer months, the heat makes meat spoil quickly. By midday, the sun beats down mercilessly, turning the inside of the wagons into ovens. Any fresh meat from a successful hunt needs to be eaten immediately or preserved somehow. Preservation becomes an obsession for pioneers. Without refrigeration, keeping food from spoiling is a constant battle. You've seen the techniques firsthand now. Smoking, drying, salting. Meat is cut into thin strips and hung over smoky fires to create jerky that will last for months. The smoke infuses the meat with flavour while drawing out moisture that would otherwise lead to rot. You can almost taste the intense, concentrated flavour of the jerky, the way it requires serious jaw strength to chew, the satisfying way it eventually softens in your mouth. Salt is precious out here, not just for flavouring food, but for preserving it. Large cuts of meat are packed in salt, drawing out moisture and creating an environment where bacteria can't thrive. Salt pork, fatty cuts of pork preserved this way, becomes a staple that finds its way into almost every meal. The saltiness is overwhelming at first, but you've gotten used to it. Sometimes you even crave that intense salty hit, especially after sweating all day in the sun. Today's breakfast is a change from the usual routine. Someone managed to gather wild strawberries yesterday, tiny things no bigger than the tip of your little finger, but bursting with sweetness. They're mixed into the cornmeal mush, turning it a pale pink and adding unexpected bursts of flavour. You savour each bite, knowing such treats are rare. After breakfast, as the wagons are being loaded for another day's travel, you wander a short distance from camp with some of the other women. They're teaching you to recognise edible plants along the trail, knowledge that could save your life if supplies run low. A woman named Sarah points out purslane growing near the temporary stream where you filled water barrels last night. Good in a salad, she says, picking a few of the succulent leaves and popping them in her mouth. Full of water too, helps with thirst. Another woman shows you wild onions, their slender green shoots poking up through the grass. The distinctive smell is unmistakable when she pulls one up, the small white bulb at the bottom sending that familiar oniony bite to your nostrils. Further along, there are dandelions, not just weeds, but a source of food. The young leaves make good greens, an older woman explains. Boil them first to take out the bitterness. The roots can be roasted for coffee when the real stuff runs out. You tuck this knowledge away, hoping you won't need it, but comforted by having it just in case. The wagon master calls for everyone to move out, and the brief foraging lesson ends as you hurry back to your place in the line. The day's journey is particularly difficult. The trail climbs steadily uphill, forcing the oxen to strain against their yokes. You can see the muscles rippling under their hides, the way they lower their heads with determination as they pull. Beside you, your husband and oldest son add their strength where the trail is steepest, pushing from behind to help the wagon over rough patches. The younger children walk alongside you, occasionally complaining of hunger despite the breakfast only hours ago. The physical strain makes everyone hungrier, but supplies need to be rationed carefully. You hand out pieces of hardtack to the children, those dense, hard crackers that will at least give them something to work on. The youngest struggles with the tough texture, so you show her how to dip it quickly in your water cup to soften it just a bit. The look of relief on her face as she finally manages to bite off a piece tugs at your heart. The nooning rest comes later than usual today. By the time the wagons circle for the midday break, stomachs are growling audibly. Today's lunch is beans, again, left over from last night's dinner and eaten cold. There's also some dried beef, tough and leathery, that needs to be torn with the teeth and chewed persistently. You can feel your jaw getting tired as you work on a particularly stubborn piece. A man from another wagon comes by, offering to trade some of his cornbread for some of your dried apples. You make the exchange gratefully, appreciating the change in flavours. Food trading has become common among the wagon train families, everyone trying to break the monotony of their rations with something different. Even the smallest variation becomes exciting when you've been eating the same things for months. As you eat, you overhear some of the men talking about hunting possibilities in the area you're passing through. Game has been scarce lately, but someone spotted deer tracks this morning. There's talk of sending out a small hunting party tomorrow if the wagon train reaches a suitable place to stop for a day. The thought of fresh meat makes your mouth water, even as you chew the dried beef that feels like leather against your teeth. The afternoon journey is even harder than the morning. The trail narrows as it winds through more mountainous terrain, slowing progress to a crawl. By the time the wagon master calls a halt for the day, the sun is already sinking toward the horizon. Everyone is exhausted, but the work isn't done. Camp needs to be set up, animals tended to, and dinner prepared before anyone can rest. Tonight's cooking conditions are challenging. A brisk wind keeps blowing out fires before they can properly catch. You join a group of women who form a human windbreak, standing with their backs to the wind while others crouch low, carefully building and shielding the precious flames. The smoke blows in your face, making your eyes water, but eventually the fires take hold. Dinner preparation begins in earnest. The routine is familiar now. Beans soaking since morning go into the pot first, along with a piece of salt pork for flavour. Cornmeal is mixed with water and a precious pinch of salt to make bread dough. Dutch ovens are nestled into the coals, their heavy iron lids topped with more hot coals to create an oven-like environment. A cry of excitement goes up from the far side of the camp. One of the men ventured a short distance away and managed to shoot 2 rabbits. It's not much for a camp of 40 people, but it's fresh meat, a luxury not to be taken for granted. The rabbits are quickly skinned and cleaned, then cut into small pieces to stretch as far as possible. They'll be added to a stew pot, along with some of those wild onions gathered this morning and a few precious dried vegetables reconstituted in water. You watch as the camp cook, an older man everyone calls Cookie, who seems to have taken charge of the communal cooking, carefully prepares the rabbit stew. His hands move with practiced efficiency as he works, his face serious with concentration. Gotta make it stretch, he mutters, more to himself than to anyone listening. Not enough meat to go around otherwise. The smell of the cooking food begins to fill the camp. Your stomach growls insistently now, reminding you that the day's exertions have burned through breakfast and lunch. The children hover near the cooking fires, drawn by the tantalizing aromas, and you have to shoo them back for safety. Finally, dinner is ready. Families gather with their plates and cups, mostly tin, practical and durable for the journey. The portions are small, especially of the rabbit stew, but every bite is savoured. The meat is lean but flavourful, the broth enriched by the vegetables and wild onions. The cornbread, fresh from the Dutch oven, has a golden crust and a tender interior. You close your eyes as you chew, focusing entirely on the pleasure of the meal after a day of hard travel. Conversation around the fires turns to food, as it often does. People share memories of favourite meals from back home, elaborate Sunday dinners with roast chicken or beef, fresh vegetables from the garden, pies cooling on the windowsill. Someone mentions ice cream and the children's eyes go wide with longing. These conversations are both comforting and torturous, a connection to the past and a hope for the future, but also a sharp reminder of all you're currently without. An older man named Johnson starts telling stories about other things pioneers eat when times get tough. He's made this journey before, guiding other wagon trains, and has seen the desperation that can set in when supplies run low or hunting fails. "Ever heard of SOB stew?" he asks, a twinkle in his eye as the children giggle at the name. "Son of a gun stew, properly speaking," he amends with a glance at the mothers in the group. "Made from all the parts of a young steer that can't be easily preserved. Heart, liver, marrow, brains. Chop it all up small, boil it with some salt and pepper, maybe some hot sauce if you've got it. Doesn't waste a bit of the animal." The conversation turns to other creative meals from the frontier. Someone mentions bear head cheese. Not a cheese at all, but a dish made from the meat of a bear's head and face, boiled down, chopped, seasoned and cooled in a mould. Another person talks about frizzled beef, dried meat cooked in milk, butter and flour, served over toast. In the telling, these strange foods somehow sound appealing, or at least interesting, though you're not sure you'd want to try them. As the evening wears on, fatigue begins to overtake hunger. The day's journey has left everyone bone-tired. The fires burn lower, conversations quieting, children are tucked into bedrolls, their eyelids heavy with sleep. You find your own spot, spreading your blanket on ground that feels marginally softer than last night's campsite. Your body sinks down gratefully, muscles relaxing into the earth beneath you. The night sounds begin their symphony, the soft nickering of horses, the distant call of night birds, the rustle of the wind through grass. Above you, the stars spread across the sky in a brilliant display, uncountable points of light in the darkness. It's one of the compensations of this difficult journey, these moments of breathtaking beauty that you'd never have seen back home. Your thoughts drift to the homestead that awaits at the end of this long trail. You imagine the garden you'll plant, rows of vegetables that will supplement the staples you've relied on during the journey. Potatoes, carrots, beans growing on poles, sweet corn tall against the summer sky. Maybe fruit trees eventually, though they'll take years to bear. A cow for milk, chickens for eggs and meat. The vision is so vivid you can almost taste the fresh produce, the eggs with bright yellow yolks, the milk still warm from the cow. But you also know the reality of pioneer settlements. That first year will be the hardest. You'll arrive too late to plant much, if anything, this season. The first task will be shelter, a crude cabin to protect against the coming winter. Clearing land for planting will come next. back-breaking work of removing trees and breaking sod. And all the while, you'll need to eat, stretching the supplies that remain from the journey and supplementing with whatever hunting, fishing and foraging can provide. You've heard stories of the starving times that many settlements go through, those first lean months or even years when the dream of abundance hasn't yet materialised. Settlers eating whatever they can find or catch, squirrels, raccoons, possums, even skunks when necessary, foraging for wild plants like sheep sorrel, a small flowering plant whose leaves could be shredded and baked into a pie that mimicked lemon in flavour. Or using apple cider vinegar to flavour desserts when fresh fruit wasn't available. Vinegar pie, a testament to pioneer ingenuity and the human craving for sweetness even in the hardest times. As sleep begins to claim you, your thoughts return to the immediate concerns of the journey. Tomorrow's meals will likely be the same as today's. Cornmeal mush for breakfast, cold beans and hardtack for lunch, beans and bacon for dinner, if no fresh meat is found. The monotony is wearing, but there's also a certain comfort in the routine, the known quantities of trail life. Your eyelids grow heavy, your breathing slows, the sounds of the camp fade as sleep approaches. Your last conscious thought is a memory from childhood. Your mother's kitchen, warm and fragrant with baking bread, the taste of fresh butter on that bread, the sweetness of jam made from berries you helped pick. Simple pleasures that now seem like unimaginable luxury. Sleep comes at last, deep and dreamless from sheer exhaustion. Tomorrow will bring another day of travel, another day of trail food, another step closer to the destination that holds both promise and uncertainty. But for now, there is only rest, your body surrendering to the profound fatigue of pioneer life. The next morning dawns clear and cold. You wake to see your breath forming small clouds in the chill air. Overnight, the temperatures dropped dramatically, a reminder that summer doesn't last forever. Even on the trail, the cold brings a new urgency to the journey. Everyone knows that reaching the destination before winter is crucial. Being caught in mountain passes when the snow flies is a death sentence. Breakfast preparations are already underway as you emerge from your blankets. The cold has everyone moving faster, seeking the warmth of the fires. Today's morning meal is a change from the usual. Instead of cornmeal mush, it's flapjacks made from the same cornmeal but fried in a skillet with a bit of precious bacon fat. The outside gets crispy while the inside stays soft and eaten hot off the griddle with a small drizzle of molasses. They're delicious enough to momentarily forget the hardships of the trail. The camp is buzzing with excitement this morning. As promised, a small hunting party is being organised to go out while the main group takes a day to rest and repair wagons. The oxen need the break as much as the people do. They've been pulling heavy loads day after day, and their strength is flagging. A day of grazing on the relatively lush grass of this valley will help restore them for the journey ahead. The hunting party sets out just after breakfast. 6 men with rifles and determined expressions. They've been given until sundown to find game and return to camp. Everyone watches them go with a mixture of hope and anxiety. The success or failure of the hunt will significantly impact the coming day's meals. With the unexpected day of rest, the women of the camp take the opportunity to do some serious cooking. It's a chance to use ingredients that have been carefully hoarded to prepare foods that take more time than the usual rushed trail meals. Dutch ovens are set up, lined with coals for baking. Sourdough starters, kept alive through the journey in small crocks, are brought out to make bread that will be a welcome change from the daily cornbread. You join a group working on a large batch of beans, not just the quick-cooked version eaten on the trail, but the slow-simmered kind that develop a rich, complex flavour. Into the pot go dried beans that have been soaking since last night, salt pork cut into small pieces, molasses for sweetness, mustard powder, and vinegar. The mixture will cook all day, the beans slowly softening, the the flavours melding into something far more delicious than the basic trail version. Another group is preparing to make jam from the wild berries that grow abundantly in this valley. Children have been sent out, under watchful eyes, to gather as many as they can find. Most will be eaten fresh, a rare treat, but some are being saved for jam. Sugar is measured out with careful precision. It's a luxury item that has been rationed strictly throughout the journey. The women discuss the best way to make the jam without proper canning equipment, settling on a small batch that will be eaten within a few days, rather than preserved for long-term storage. The industrious activity of the camp brings a sense of normalcy, almost like being back in a proper kitchen rather than cooking over campfires in the wilderness. There's laughter and conversation, recipes shared and techniques compared. It's a reminder that food is not just about survival, it's about community, about culture, about the comfort of familiar routines, even in unfamiliar surroundings. By midday, the smells coming from the cooking fires have everyone's stomachs growling. The sourdough bread is baking in Dutch ovens, giving off that yeasty, tantalising aroma that makes it impossible to think of anything else. The bean pots simmer, releasing occasional bursts of steam that carry the rich, savoury scent across the camp. Wild onions and other foraged greens are being sautéed in bacon fat, adding their own distinctive fragrance to the mix. Lunch is unusually substantial today, given the luxury of time for proper cooking. The fresh bread comes out of the Dutch ovens with a perfect golden crust, the interior soft and tangy from the sourdough. Sliced while still warm, it's served with a bean soup that's been cooking long enough to become thick and flavourful. There are also the sautéed greens, providing a fresh element that's been sorely lacking in trail meals. You savour each bite, the flavours so much more developed than the hasty meals of travelling days. The bread has a complex, slightly sour taste that pairs perfectly with the rich soup. The greens add a bright note, their slight bitterness balanced by the bacon fat they were cooked in. It's still simple food by the standards of home, but after weeks of basic trail rations, it tastes like a feast. After lunch, while many take the opportunity to nap or mend clothes, you join a small group heading to a nearby stream to fish. The clear, cold water rushes over rocks, creating small pools where trout might lurk. You've never fished before, it wasn't something you did back home, but one of the women shows you how to use a simple line and hook, baited with a small piece of salt pork. The afternoon passes pleasantly by the stream. The sun warms your back as you sit on the bank, line in the water, listening to the soothing sound of flowing water. Your muscles, sore from days of walking, begin to relax. The constant vigilance required on the trail eases just a bit in this peaceful setting. The fishing is surprisingly successful. Between the 5 of you, 8 decent-sized trout are caught, a welcome addition to the evening meal. You watch carefully as one of the women cleans the fish with quick, practiced movements, noting the technique for future reference. The clean fish are wrapped in leaves to keep them fresh for the short walk back to camp. By the time you return, the hunting party is also back, and the news is good. They've managed to bring down a deer, not a large one, but enough to provide some fresh meat for the camp. The animal has already been field dressed and is now being butchered, the meat divided among the families, according to a system worked out early in the journey. Nothing will be wasted. Even the organs will be cooked and eaten, the bones used for broth, the hide scraped and preserved for later use. The evening meal promises to be the best in weeks. The bean pots continue to simmer, developing even deeper flavour. The fish are being prepared for cooking, some to be fried in skillets, others wrapped in leaves with wild herbs and placed directly in the coals to bake. The venison is being cut into steaks and roasts, with some reserved for stewing. The smaller, tougher cuts are being sliced thin for jerky that will be smoked overnight and throughout the next day. As the cooking continues, spirits in the camp are high. The successful hunt and fishing expedition, combined with the day of rest, have rejuvenated everyone. There's even talk of a small celebration after dinner, music and perhaps some dancing, a rare indulgence on the trail where conserving energy is usually paramount. The sun begins to sink toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the camp. The temperature drops again, reminding everyone that fall is approaching, but the multiple cooking fires keep the immediate area warm, and the promise of the coming meal has everyone in good humour despite the chill. Finally, dinner is served. Families gather with their plates, eyes wide at the variety of food available tonight. There's the slow-cooked beans, rich and flavourful. The fresh fish, either crispy from the skillet or moist and tender from baking in the coals. The venison, quickly seared to preserve its juiciness, still pink in the centre. Fresh bread to accompany it all, and even a small amount of wild berry jam as a sweet finish. You pile your plate with a little of everything, the aroma making your mouth water before you even take the first bite. The venison is particularly wonderful, so different from the salt pork and dried beef that have been staples of the journey. The meat is tender and flavourful, with just the right amount of gamey taste. The fish provides a lighter counterpoint, its delicate flavour enhanced by the wild herbs it was cooked with. As you eat, you realise that these are the moments that make the hardships of the trail bearable, these brief intervals of plenty amid the general scarcity, these opportunities to remember that food can be more than mere survival. It's a connection to the land you're travelling through, to the communities you're part of, to the traditions you carry with you from back home and the new ones you're creating along the way. The meal stretches longer than usual, everyone reluctant to see it end. Stories are shared around the fires, some about food, recipes from home, tales of particularly memorable meals, amusing cooking disasters. There's a sense of camaraderie that transcends the usual divisions between families and wagons. Food has brought everyone together in a shared experience of satisfaction and gratitude. As the evening winds down, you find yourself pleasantly full and deeply tired. Not the desperate exhaustion of travel days, but the good tiredness that comes from productive activity and proper nourishment. You make your way to your bedroll, spreading it on ground that's becoming familiar after a full day in the same spot. The stars appear one by one in the darkening sky as you settle in for the night. The sounds of the camp gradually quiet, conversations ending, children being tucked in, fires banked for the morning. Your body feels heavy with contentment sinking into the earth beneath you. Your breathing slows, deepens. Tomorrow, the journey will resume with all its challenges and hardships. The regular routine of trail meals will return. Cornmeal mush, hardtack, beans and bacon. But for now, the memory of today's abundance is enough. You drift off to sleep with the taste of venison still on your tongue, the warmth of the fire still on your skin, and the comfort of a truly satisfying meal in your belly. Sleep comes easily, deep and restful. In your dreams, you're in that homestead again, but now it's no longer just a hopeful vision. Now you can almost touch it. The garden full of vegetables, the fruit trees beginning to blossom, the smoke rising from the chimney of a snug cabin. And in that dream kitchen, you're cooking a meal much like tonight's. Simple but abundant, made from the fruits of your own labour and the bounty of the land you've claimed as your new home. Morning arrives with a thin mist hovering over the camp, the air damp and cool against your skin as you emerge from your blankets. The day of rest is over. Today, the journey continues. You can feel a difference in your body. Muscles not quite as sore, mind not quite as foggy. Even one day of proper rest and good food has restored something vital within you. The camp is already active despite the early hour. Fires are being built up from the banked coals of last night. The remnants of yesterday's venison are being prepared for the day's travel, some cut into strips for jerky that will dry as the wagons move, the rest divided among families for immediate consumption. Nothing goes to waste on the frontier. Breakfast is hearty this morning, venison fried with potatoes from dwindling stores and more of that wonderful sourdough bread, though now it's a day old and slightly dried out. You dip pieces of the bread into the grease in the skillet, softening it and adding flavour. The hot food warms you from the inside, preparing your body for the day ahead. As you eat, you find yourself wondering about that sourdough starter that's been travelling with the wagon train since independence. Someone must have brought it from even further back east, carrying it carefully across the country. Sourdough starters are precious on the frontier. A bit of culinary magic that transforms simple flour and water into risen bread without the need for store-bought yeast. Each starter has its own unique flavour, developed over years or even decades, passed down through generations like a family heirloom. You've heard stories of pioneers who lost everything in accidents or Indian attacks, but still managed to save their sourdough starter, tucking the small crock into a pocket or bag as they fled, knowing that as long as they had this, they could make bread wherever they settled. The thought of bread reminds you that the flour supply is running low. The journey has taken longer than expected, with delays for bad weather, broken wagons, and sickness along the way. The wagon master confirms your concerns at the morning meeting before departure. Flour rations are cut to half from today, he announces, his weathered face serious. We're still a good 3 weeks from our destination if the weather holds. We need to make what we have last. A murmur runs through the gathered pioneers, not quite protest, but concern. Flour is the foundation of so much of the trail diet. Less flour means less bread, less gravy, less thickener for stews. But no one argues. Everyone understands the reality of the situation. We'll be passing through good foraging country, the wagon master continues, offering some hope. Plenty of wild foods to supplement our supplies if you know what to look for. Johnson and Mrs. Bailey will give instruction as we travel for those who aren't familiar with the local plants. With that, preparations for departure begin in earnest. The oxen are brought in from their night of grazing, looking somewhat refreshed but still showing the strain of the long journey in their bony frames and dull coats. The wagons are loaded, canvas covers secured, children gathered, and before the sun is fully above the horizon, the train is moving again. The day's travel is easier than before the rest day, the trail winding through a broad valley with relatively flat terrain. The wagon's rocking motion feels almost soothing after the jarring uphill climb of previous days. You walk alongside, saving the oxen from having to pull your weight, as well as the wagon's load. The dirt of the trail is soft under your boots, the rhythmic sound of hooves and wheels creating a kind of moving meditation. As promised, the valley is rich with potential forage. Johnson, the experienced guide, points out edible plants as the wagon train moves slowly along. "See there?" he says, indicating a plant with arrow-shaped leaves growing near a damp area. "That's arrowhead. The roots are good eating, like potatoes, but sweeter. Native folks have been harvesting them for centuries." Later, he stops to show a group how to identify wild onions, digging one up to reveal the familiar bulb beneath the soil. "These'll flavour your stew right nice," he explains. "And they keep well if you dry 'em for later." Mrs. Bailey, a grandmotherly woman who's made this journey twice before, focuses on berries and fruits. She shows the children how to recognise wild strawberries, their tiny red fruits hiding among the leaves. "Sweeter than anything you'll find in a garden," she tells them, letting each child taste one. "But you gotta be careful. Some berries out here will make you mighty sick. Don't eat anything unless you're sure what it is. By midday, many of the pioneers have small sacks or bundles of foraged foods, wild greens, berries, roots and herbs. It's not enough to replace the reduced rations, but it will add variety and nutrition to the basic trail diet. You've managed to gather a handful of wild onions and some tender greens that Mrs. Bailey called lamb's quarters, saying they cook up much like spinach. The nooning stop comes in a shady grove beside a small creek. The water is clear and cold, a welcome relief after the warming day. Everyone drinks deeply, refills water barrels, and settles in the shade for the midday meal and rest. Lunch is cold venison from yesterday and hardtack softened in coffee. You add some of the wild greens, eating them raw for their fresh, slightly peppery taste. It's a simple meal, but satisfying in a way that trail food often isn't. The wild foods connect you to the land you're passing through in a new way, not just travelling over it, but beginning to understand and use what it offers. As you eat, an older woman named Martha sits nearby, working on something in her lap. Curious, you move closer and see she's preparing dandelion roots, cleaning them carefully with a small knife. Making coffee? You ask, remembering the talk of dandelion root coffee from earlier in the journey. Martha nods. Real coffee's almost gone, she says matter-of-factly. Been mixing it half and half with dandelion for a week now. Soon it'll be all dandelion till we reach the settlement. She looks up, noticing your interest. Want to learn? It's not hard, just takes a bit of time. You settle beside her and she shows you how to clean the roots thoroughly, chop them into small pieces and dry them in the sun. Once they're dry, you roast them till they're dark brown, almost black and brittle, she explains. Then grind them up just like coffee beans. The brew isn't exactly the same, but it's hot and dark and better than nothing when the real stuff runs out. The afternoon journey continues through increasingly varied terrain. The valley gradually narrows, the trail beginning to climb again toward a distant pass. The wagon's pace slows as the oxen strain against the incline. Everyone walks now, even the elderly and young children, to lighten the load. As you climb higher, the vegetation changes. Different plants appear along the trail, and Johnson points out new foraging opportunities. Pine nuts, he says, indicating the large cones of a particular pine tree. Tedious to get at, but worth the effort, full of fat and flavour. He shows how to gather the cones and extract the small, nutritious seeds inside. By the time the wagon master calls a halt for the day, you've climbed significantly higher than the morning's camp. The air is noticeably cooler here, the view expansive as you look back over the valley you've traversed. Making camp is a well-practiced routine now. Wagons circled, animals unhitched and led to grazing, fires built and cooking begun. Tonight's meal is a true pioneer creation, a stew made from the last of yesterday's venison, stretched with wild onions, the foraged greens and those arrowhead roots Johnson pointed out, which really do taste like sweeter potatoes. With the flour ration reduced, there's cornbread instead of wheat bread, made from the remaining cornmeal and baked in the Dutch ovens. The result is surprisingly good, the wild foods adding flavour and interest to what could have been a very plain meal. You savour each bite, aware that such variety might not be available as the journey continues. The cornbread, while different from the sourdough of yesterday, has its own appeal. A coarser texture, but a sweet, nutty flavour that pairs well with the savoury stew. After dinner, as darkness falls and the temperature drops further, people gather close to the fires. Conversation turns to food once again, but now with a practical focus. The reduced rations mean everyone needs to be more resourceful, more aware of alternative food sources. Those with experience share knowledge with those making their first journey west. An old trapper named Silas, who joined the wagon train as a guide in the mountain sections, begins talking about survival foods he's learned from years in the wilderness and from the native peoples he's encountered. When game is scarce and supplies are low, he says, his voice gravelly from years of campfire smoke, you gotta think different about what's food and what ain't. He describes pemmican, a concentrated mixture of dried meat, rendered fat, and berries that Native Americans have made for centuries. Pound the dried meat to almost powder, he explains. Mix it with melted fat and dried berries if you've got 'em. Stores for months without spoiling, and a small piece will keep you going all day. Silas moves on to other survival foods, things most of the pioneers would never have considered eating under normal circumstances. Ants, he says, to the children's squealing delight and the adults' sceptical looks. No, I'm serious. They're tart, like vinegar, good in a pinch. He describes how to eat the inner bark of certain trees when nothing else is available, which wild mushrooms are safe and which will kill you, and how to find grubs and insects that, while unappetizing, could keep you alive. The conversation shifts to food preservation, critical knowledge for the homesteading that awaits at the journey's end. Different methods are discussed: smoking, drying, salting, pickling. Each has its strengths and limitations, its particular uses for different types of food. Martha, the woman who taught you about dandelion coffee, talks about root cellars, underground storage spaces that use the earth's natural cooling and insulating properties to preserve vegetables through winter. First thing you'll want to dig once you've got shelter, she advises. Keep your potatoes, carrots, beets, cabbage and such cool but not frozen. They'll last for months that way. Someone else describes ash barrels for storing root vegetables, layers of clean wood ash alternating with layers of carrots or beets, keeping them from touching each other and preventing rot. Another explains how to dry sweet corn for winter use, how to preserve eggs using water glass, sodium silicate, and how to keep milk fresh longer by storing it in a spring house or well. It's a wealth of practical knowledge passed from experienced pioneers to greenhorns, from older generations to younger ones. You listen carefully, mentally filing away information that could mean the difference between comfort and hunger in the months and years ahead. As the evening progresses, talk turns to the foods pioneers miss most from back east. Fresh milk, eggs, butter, garden vegetables. Someone mentions ice cream wistfully, and there are groans of longing from around the fire. The simple pleasures of the old life seem impossibly luxurious now, after months on the trail with basic rations and occasional wild foods. But there's also pride in the conversation, pride in the resourcefulness and adaptability that pioneer life demands and develops. These people have learned to make do with what's available, to find nourishment where others might see nothing edible, to create satisfying meals from the simplest ingredients. It's a hard-earned skill, this frontier cuisine, and not everyone is equal to the challenge. As the fire burns lower and the night grows colder, people begin to drift away to their bedrolls. The day's climb has left everyone tired, and tomorrow promises more of the same as the wagon train continues toward the mountain pass. You find your own spot, spreading your blankets on ground that's rockier than the valley below. Your muscles ache from the uphill walking, but it's a clean ache, not the bone-deep exhaustion of previous days. Lying there, looking up at stars that seem closer in this higher elevation, you think about the journey so far and what still lies ahead. Food has become more than just sustenance. It's a constant preoccupation, a measure of the journey's progress, a connection to the land you're traversing and the community you're traveling with. The reduced rations are concerning, but the day's foraging success offers some reassurance. You're learning to see the landscape differently, to recognize the subtle signs of edible plants, to understand that food doesn't just come from farms and stores, but from the wild places in between. Sleep comes more easily than you expected, your body surrendering to fatigue despite the hard ground and cooling air. Your dreams are filled with strange, vivid images, fields of wild strawberries stretching to the horizon, venison roasting over enormous fires, bread rising like magic in Dutch ovens the size of wagons. Food dreams, the unconscious mind processing the day's preoccupations in its own peculiar way. The morning comes with a sharp chill that penetrates your blankets, pulling you reluctantly from sleep. Your breath forms small clouds in the air as you sit up, shivering. Frost glitters on the grass around the camp, the first sign that summer is waning, fall approaching. The mountain pass looms ahead, and beyond it the unknown territory that will eventually lead to your destination. Breakfast is subdued this morning, cornmeal mush again, but thinner than usual, stretched with water to make it go further. There's the last of the venison jerky to chew on, providing some protein but requiring serious jaw work. The dandelion coffee is stronger today, with less real coffee mixed in. Its bitter edge not quite masked by the small amount of precious sugar added to the pot. As you eat, huddled near the fire for warmth, you listen to the conversation around you. The frost has everyone worried. Early cold snap, mutters one old-timer, shaking his head. Bad sign, need to get through the pass before any real weather hits. The wagon master agrees, announcing that today's travel will be longer than usual, pushing to reach better shelter before making camp. No nooning stop today, he declares. Eat as we go. Need to make good time while the weather holds. This news adds urgency to the morning preparations. Extra food is prepared to be eaten cold during the day's journey. Cornbread, the last of the jerky, dried fruit reconstituted overnight in water. Water barrels are filled to the brim from the nearby stream, which runs fast and clear from the mountains above. The oxen seem to sense the urgency, moving with more purpose as they're hitched to the wagons. Their breath forms the same small clouds as the humans, their massive bodies steaming slightly in the cold morning air. You pat the flank of the nearest ox, feeling the solid muscle beneath the hide, the living warmth of the animal that has become so essential to your journey. The wagon train moves out earlier than usual, the sun just beginning to crest the eastern ridges. The trail steepens immediately, winding through increasingly rocky terrain with scattered pines and juniper. Walking requires more effort now, your legs working harder against the incline, your lungs pulling in the thin, cold air with deeper breaths. Foraging is more challenging in this environment, but still possible. Johnson points out juniper berries, not for eating directly, but for flavouring meat or tea. There are pine nuts to be gathered when the wagon train pauses briefly to rest the oxen. Wild raspberries grow in protected pockets where soil and moisture accumulate. Their tart sweet berries a welcome treat during the strenuous climb. By midday, when you would normally stop for the nooning rest, the wagon train keeps moving. You eat as you walk, cold cornbread that crumbles in your hands, dried apple slices that have softened overnight but still require determined chewing. The food provides energy, but there's little pleasure in eating this way, gulping down bites between breaths as you climb steadily upward. The afternoon brings a new challenge. The trail narrows as it enters a rocky defile, forcing the wagons to proceed single file with careful manoeuvring to avoid damage to wheels or axles. Progress slows to a crawl. The sun passes its zenith and begins the downward arc toward evening, shadows lengthening across the trail. Despite the slow pace, the physical effort remains intense. Everyone is helping now. Men and older boys putting shoulders to wagon wheels where the trail is steepest. Women and girls leading the oxen carefully through the narrow passages. Your hands become raw from the rough wood of the wagon. Your shoulders ache from pushing. Your throat burns with thirst that the occasional sips from your canteen can't quite quench. Hunger joins thirst as the day wears on. The morning's food is long gone, burned up by the hard physical labour of the climb. There's no opportunity to stop for a proper meal, just quick handfuls of whatever is accessible in the wagons as you continue to move. Some of the children are crying now, tired and hungry, but there's no choice but to keep going. The pass must be reached before dark. Finally, as the sun dips toward the western horizon, the trail widens and levels out somewhat. You've reached the mountain pass, a relatively flat area nestled between higher peaks on either side. The wagon master calls a halt, and there's a collective sigh of relief from humans and animals alike. The campsite is less than ideal, rocky ground with little grass for the animals, but it offers some shelter from the wind that's picking up as evening approaches. Fires are built quickly, their warmth a blessing after the increasingly cold day. Water is heated for coffee, mostly dandelion now, with just a hint of the real thing for flavour, and cooking begins with haste, everyone aware of their gnawing hunger after the long, strenuous day. Tonight's meal is simple necessity rather than any kind of culinary achievement. Beans, of course, always beans, soaked this morning and now boiled with a small piece of salt pork for flavour. There's cornbread again, the diminishing cornmeal supply stretched even further, with some ground pine nuts added to the batter. The result is coarser than usual, but surprisingly nutty and flavourful. Some of the women have managed to gather enough wild raspberries during the brief stops to make a simple sauce, mashing the berries with a little sugar. Spooned over the cornbread, it transforms the basic food into something almost decadent after the privations of the day. You eat slowly despite your hunger, savouring each bite, letting the warm food work its way through your body. The beans are soft and comforting, the cornbread filling, the berry sauce a bright note of flavour that seems to lift everyone's spirits. Simple food, but after the day's exertion it tastes better than any fancy meal you can remember from back east. The talk around the fires tonight is subdued, everyone too tired for lengthy conversations. The focus is on practical matters, how much further to the next good water source, what the weather might do, how the supplies are holding out. The wagon master reports that flour is running even lower than expected, and cornmeal isn't far behind. From tomorrow, grain rations will be cut again. This news is met with resigned nods rather than protests. Everyone can see the situation for themselves, the dwindling supplies, the long journey still ahead, the changing season adding urgency to their progress. There's no point in complaint, only in adaptation. An older woman named Hannah, who's been mostly quiet throughout the journey, suddenly speaks up. "My grandmother had a recipe for survival bread," she says, her voice soft but clear in the evening quiet. "For when times were lean and flour scarce, called it leather breeches bread." Interest perks up around the fire. Any new food idea is welcome at this point. Hannah continues, describing a bread made from dried green beans, leather breeches as they were called when strung up to dry, that are boiled, mashed and mixed with a small amount of cornmeal to form a dough. "Ain't pretty," she admits, and the taste takes some getting used to, but it fills the belly and keeps you going. Got my grandmother's family through a winter when their grain stores were lost to weevils. Similar stories begin to emerge around the fire, family recipes and techniques for stretching meagre supplies in hard times. Someone describes a soup thickened with dried and ground acorns instead of flour. Another talks about bread made from cattail roots pounded into flour and mixed with whatever grain was available. These aren't foods anyone would choose under normal circumstances, but they represent the frontier spirit of resourcefulness and survival. Nothing is wasted, no possibility overlooked when it comes to feeding yourself and your family in the wilderness. As the conversation continues, you find yourself drifting into a strange, not quite sleep state. The day's exertion has left you exhausted beyond simple tiredness, your body demanding rest even as you try to stay engaged with the talk around you. The firelight blurs, voices becoming indistinct as fatigue overwhelms your senses. Someone touches your shoulder gently, bringing you back to awareness. It's Martha, the dandelion coffee woman, concern in her weathered face. "Best get to your bed, young one," she says kindly. "Tomorrow's another hard day, and you need your rest." You nod gratefully, too tired to speak, and make your way to your bedroll. The ground is hard and rocky beneath your blankets, but it hardly matters. Sleep is already pulling at you, dragging you down into darkness before you've even fully settled. Your last conscious thought is about food, not the basic trail rations or even the venison feast of 2 nights ago, but a memory from childhood. Fresh bread just out of your mother's oven, slathered with butter and honey, the first bite burning your tongue because you were too impatient to let it cool. The taste and smell are so vivid in your memory that you almost believe you could reach out and take a piece if you just tried hard enough. But sleep claims you before the thought can fully form, pulling you into dreams where food is always abundant, always satisfying, always just within reach. Your body surrenders to exhaustion, muscles relaxing despite the hard ground, breath deepening into the rhythm of deep sleep. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new hunger, new lessons in frontier survival. But for now, there is only rest. Dawn comes with a biting chill, the sky overhead clear and piercingly blue. You wake slowly, body protesting every movement after yesterday's climb. The mountain pass is beautiful in the early light, stark, rugged, with views that stretch for miles in both directions. On a different journey, you might pause to appreciate the grandeur. Today, all you can think about is the difficult descent ahead and the empty feeling in your stomach. Breakfast is meagre, a thin cornmeal gruel with a few dried berries added for flavour and the increasingly bitter dandelion coffee. You cup the hot tin mug in your cold hands, letting the warmth seep into your stiff fingers before taking careful sips. The heat of the liquid is almost more satisfying than its taste. Around you, the camp stirs with subdued activity. Everyone feels the pressure now. Dwindling supplies, changing weather, the long road still ahead. The wagon master walks through camp, checking on families, assessing their condition. He stops near your fire, accepting a cup of the dandelion brew with a nod of thanks. "Hard going today," he says without preamble, looking toward the trail that winds down from the pass, steeper and more treacherous than the ascent. "Need to get down to the valley before nightfall. Better grazing for the animals there, and we might find some game." You nod, understanding the unspoken concern. The oxen are growing dangerously thin, their strength fading after months of pulling heavy wagons across the continent. Without the animals, the journey cannot continue, at least not with the wagons and the bulk of your possessions. And game has been scarce for days now, the hunting parties returning empty-handed more often than not. The camp is packed up quickly, everyone moving with the efficiency of long practice despite their fatigue. The oxen are hitched, their breath steaming in the cold air, their eyes dull with exhaustion. You stroke the neck of one as you pass, feeling the prominent bones beneath the hide. and whisper a word of encouragement. These patient beasts have become partners in the journey, their welfare as important as the humans they serve. The descent begins cautiously, the wagon wheels locked with chains on the steepest sections to prevent dangerous acceleration. Everyone walks, even the elderly and young children, both to spare the oxen and for safety. One slip, one runaway wagon could be catastrophic on this narrow trail. The cold is persistent despite the climbing sun, the air thin and sharp in your lungs. Your empty stomach clenches with hunger, but there's nothing to eat until the midday stop. You focus on placing one foot carefully in front of the other, on the rhythm of your breathing, on staying alert for loose rocks or sudden drops. By mid-morning, the trail has descended enough that the vegetation begins to change. The sparse, wind-twisted pines of the pass give way to more varied growth. Stands of aspen with leaves just beginning to turn gold, thickets of berries, meadows of late summer grasses and flowers. The foraging possibilities improve with each mile downward. During a brief stop to rest the oxen, Johnson points out a patch of tiny wild strawberries growing in a sunny spot beside the trail. The children pounce on the find, their small fingers deftly plucking the berries and popping them directly into their mouths. There aren't enough to collect for later, but the fresh, sweet taste is an immediate morale boost. Further along, Martha identifies a stand of choke cherries, small, dark berries with a astringent flavour that puckers the mouth when eaten raw. Not good for eating straight, she explains, but fine for jelly if we had sugar to spare. The natives dry them and pound them into pemmican. The mention of natives brings a ripple of tension through the group. This territory belongs to several tribes, and while encounters have been mostly peaceful during the journey, there's always uncertainty. Some settlers view the native peoples with fear, others with curiosity or respect. Most recognise that indigenous knowledge of local food sources could be invaluable in their current situation. The wagon train continues its careful descent, the trail occasionally levelling out to provide brief respite before the next steep section. By midday, you've made good progress, the pass now visibly above you, the valley spread out below. The wagon master calls a short halt for rest and food. Not a proper nooning stop, but enough time to catch your breath and eat something to keep you going. The midday meal is cold cornbread from yesterday and a handful of dried apple slices reconstituted overnight in water. The bread crumbles in your hands, dry and coarse, but it's something in your empty stomach. The apple slices are chewy and tart, the closest thing to fresh fruit you've had in weeks, aside from the occasional wild berries. As you eat, you notice Silas, the old trapper, examining something growing on a fallen log a short distance from the trail. Curious, you wander over when you've finished your meagre lunch. He's carefully cutting what look like strange growths from the rotting wood. Pale, ear-shaped things with gills underneath. Mushrooms, you ask, keeping a respectful distance. You've heard enough cautionary tales about poisonous fungi to be wary. Silas nods, his weathered hands moving with surprising delicacy as he harvests the mushrooms and places them in a small cloth bag. Oyster mushrooms, he explains. Good eating and safe if you know what you're looking for. The woods are full of food if you've got the eyes to see it. He shows you the identifying features, the distinctive shape, the way the gills run down the stem, the slightly sweet smell. Never eat any mushroom unless you're dead certain what it is, he warns. Some of the poisonous ones look mighty similar to the good ones. Not worth the risk unless you know exactly what you're doing. The brief rest ends all too soon, the wagon master calling for everyone to move out. The descent continues, growing less steep as the afternoon wears on. The valley below comes into clearer focus. A broad expanse of grassland with a river winding through it, stands of trees along the water and at the base of the surrounding hills. It looks promising for both grazing and hunting, and a murmur of relief passes through the wagon train. By late afternoon, the worst of the descent is behind you. The trail flattens out, running along a ridge that will eventually meet the valley floor. The going is easier now, the oxen moving more willingly as if they sense the better conditions ahead. The air is warmer here, less thin, and wild flowers still bloom along the trail despite the advancing season. Mrs. Bailey points out edible plants as you walk, wild onions, their slender green shoots poking up through the grass, lamb's quarters with their distinctive diamond-shaped leaves, purslane spreading in low, succulent mats in sunny spots. "Good in a salad," she says of the purslane, picking a few leaves and offering them to you. Juicy too, helps with thirst. You chew the leaves cautiously, surprised by their slight tartness and the way they seem to refresh your dry mouth. It's a small thing, but after months of basic trail rations, any new flavour is welcome. You gather a handful to add to the evening meal, tucking them carefully into your pocket. The sun is low in the west by the time the wagon train reaches the valley floor. The wagon master calls a halt near the river, where a stand of cottonwoods offers both shelter and firewood. The relief is palpable as the oxen are unhitched and led to the lush grass along the riverbank. People move with more energy than they've shown in days, invigorated by the successful descent and the promising location. Camp is established with practiced efficiency, wagons circled, fires built, water fetched from the river. A hunting party forms immediately, men with rifles heading out to see what game might be found before dark. Others take fishing lines to the river, hoping to supplement the evening meal with fresh catch. You join a group gathering edible plants near the camp, adding to the wild onions, purslane, and other greens already collected during the day's journey. Someone finds a patch of miner's lettuce, a succulent plant with round leaves and tiny white flowers, and calls others over to harvest the tender greens. Further along, there are cattails growing in a marshy area, their roots edible and starchy when properly prepared. The foraging is more successful than it's been in days, everyone returning to camp with at least some wild foods to contribute to the communal cooking pots. The fishing yields results too, several decent-sized trout pulled from deep pools in the river. Only the hunting party returns empty-handed, reporting signs of deer but no actual sightings. Despite the lack of fresh game, dinner preparations have an almost festive air. After the privations of recent days, the abundance of foraged foods and fish feels like luxury. The camp cook sets up his Dutch ovens, assigning tasks with brisk efficiency. Some women clean and fillet the fish, while others wash and prepare the wild greens. The few remaining potatoes from the wagon supplies are peeled and sliced thin to stretch further. Silas contributes his oyster mushrooms to the pot, showing the cook how to clean and slice them properly. Cook 'em well, he advises. They're perfectly safe, but some folks' stomachs do better with mushrooms when they're thoroughly cooked. The resulting meal is a kind of fish and wild vegetable stew, with the mushrooms adding a savoury depth to the broth. The last of the cornmeal is mixed with water and a pinch of salt to make a simple bread dough, flattened into cakes and baked in a grease skillet over the fire, what the southerners in the group call hoe cakes. The aroma of cooking food fills the camp, making stomachs growl with anticipation. When it's finally ready, the meal is distributed carefully, making sure everyone gets a fair share. The portions aren't large, supplies are still critically low despite the day's foraging success. But the variety and freshness make it seem more satisfying than larger meals of basic staples. You savour each bite, the flaky white fish, the earthy mushrooms, the mix of wild greens with their different textures and flavours. The hoe cake is crisp on the outside, soft within, perfect for sopping up the flavourful broth. After days of increasingly monotonous and scarce rations, it feels like a feast. As people finish eating, the mood around the fires is the most relaxed it's been in days. The successful descent from the pass, the relatively abundant meal, and the comfortable campsite have restored a sense of optimism. Conversation flows more easily, with less focus on immediate concerns and more on hopes for the journey's end, now perhaps only 2 weeks away if the weather holds and no further delays occur. The wagon master takes advantage of the improved mood to call a meeting after dinner. As darkness falls and the fires burn lower, he outlines the situation with unflinching honesty. Our grain supplies are critically low, he says, his weathered face serious in the firelight. At current rations, we have perhaps 5 days of cornmeal left and the flour is already gone. We need to supplement with wild foods as much as possible and hope for successful hunting along the way. He pauses, looking around the circle of faces. We're still at least 10 days from our destination, maybe more if we hit bad weather or difficult terrain. I won't sugarcoat it. We're going to be hungry before we get there, but people have made this journey with less and survived. We keep moving, we keep our eyes open for food opportunities, and we help each other through. That's how pioneers do. There are nods around the fire, faces solemn but determined. No one came on this journey expecting ease or comfort. The hardships are part of the price paid for the new life waiting at the end of the trail. Land of your own, a fresh start, possibilities that didn't exist back east. After the meeting, smaller conversations form around the various fires. The topic inevitably returns to food, not just immediate concerns about trail rations, but plans for the homesteads that await. People share knowledge about planting gardens, raising animals, preserving the harvest for winter. These discussions have a different quality now, more urgent and practical as the reality of frontier life approaches. A woman named Rebecca, who made this journey once before and is now returning with her husband and children, talks about her first year in the settlement. "The garden saved us," she says simply. "We arrived too late to plant much, but the neighbours helped with enough to get us through winter. Come spring, I put in everything I could: potatoes, corn, beans, squash. By the second summer, we were eating better than we ever did back east." She describes how they gradually added to their food sources: chickens for eggs and occasional meat, a cow for milk, pigs that foraged in the woods during summer and provided meat for winter. "It's hard work," she admits, "especially that first year, but the land gives back what you put into it, and more besides. Just have to make it through the beginning." As the evening deepens, you find yourself beside Martha, the woman who taught you about dandelion coffee. She's working on something in a lap, sorting through a collection of seeds, carefully separating them into small cloth packets. "Garden seeds," she explains when she notices your interest. "Been saving them for years. Different kinds of beans, peas, squash, corn that grows well in short seasons. Some herbs too. Sage, thyme, mint. First thing you'll want to plant when you get your place." She hands you a small packet of beans. "These are good producers, and they'll grow just about anywhere. Plant them as soon as you can prepare the ground. Come spring." The simple gift touches you deeply, a tangible connection to the future beyond the current hardships, a vote of confidence that you'll complete the journey successfully. As the fires burn down to coals and people begin to seek their bedrolls, you linger a moment, looking up at the vast spread of stars overhead. The valley is peaceful, the rush of the river a soothing background to the night sounds of insects and distant animals. Despite the hunger that still gnaws at your belly, despite the uncertainty of the days ahead, there's a sense of rightness to being here, of moving towards something important, even through difficulty. Your bedroll is more comfortable tonight than it's been in days, grass cushioning the ground, the air milder than in the mountain pass. Your muscles still ache from the long descent, but it's a clean fatigue, the kind that promises deep sleep rather than restless exhaustion. As you drift towards slumber, your thoughts return to food, not the immediate concerns of trail rations, but the garden you'll plant at journey's end. You imagine the neat rows of vegetables, the satisfaction of pulling the first radishes, the abundance of midsummer harvest. The hunger in your belly seems less important against that vision of future plenty. Sleep comes quickly, deep and restful. Your dreams are peaceful for once, not the fevered hunger dreams of recent nights, but calm visions of the homestead that awaits. In those dreams, you walk through a flourishing garden, feeling the warm earth beneath your bare feet, the sun on your skin, the satisfaction of growing your own food after the long privation of the journey. Morning arrives with the first hint of autumn crispness, dew heavy on the grass, mist rising from the river in ghostly tendrils. You wake feeling genuinely rested for the first time in days, your body still sore but somehow lighter, more capable. The promised rest day has arrived, a full day in this sheltered valley to recuperate, repair wagons and gather food before continuing the journey. Breakfast is similar to yesterday's dinner. Fish caught at dawn, wild greens and the last of the hoe cakes. The portions are still small, but after yesterday's relative abundance, the edge of desperate hunger has dulled somewhat. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, letting the food and the hot dandelion coffee work their way through your system, bringing energy and warmth. The day stretches ahead with various necessary tasks, but without the pressure of travel. Wagons need repairs after the difficult mountain crossing. Wheels tightened, canvas mended, axles greased. Laundry needs washing in the river, taking advantage of the plentiful water. And most importantly, food needs gathering to supplement the dwindling supplies for the journey ahead. The camp divides naturally into work groups based on skills and interests. A larger hunting party forms, planning to spend the full day searching for game in the surrounding hills. Fishing lines are set up along the river, tended by older children who can also keep an eye on the youngest members of the wagon train. Foraging parties prepare to explore further from camp than was possible during yesterday's arrival. You join a group led by Mrs. Bailey, heading upstream along the river to search for edible plants and perhaps wild fruits. The morning is peaceful, the physical activity pleasurable after the constraints of wagon travel. Your body finds a natural rhythm as you walk, eyes scanning the riverbank and adjacent meadows for useful plants. The foraging is successful beyond expectations. You find more miner's lettuce growing abundantly in shady spots, cattails with their starchy roots, wild onions and various other edible greens. In sunny clearings there are wild strawberries again, tiny but intensely flavourful. Further along you discover a patch of wild blackberries, the late fruits still hanging on the thorny canes. Mrs. Bailey shows the group how to gather stinging nettles without getting stung, using a stick to knock down the young plants and then carefully handling them by the roots. Best cooked, she explains, the sting goes away with heat and they're as nourishing as spinach, full of iron that women especially need. By midday, your baskets and sacks are filled with a surprising variety of wild foods. The group returns to camp for a brief rest and to deliver the morning's harvest before setting out again in a different direction. The hunting party is still out, but those fishing have had good luck with a respectable pile of cleaned fish ready for the evening meal. The afternoon foraging takes you into the wooded areas at the base of the hills. Here, the bounty is different but equally valuable. Silas points out more edible mushrooms, not just the oyster variety from yesterday, but chanterelles with their distinctive golden colour and slight apricot smell. He shows how to tell them apart from similar-looking toxic varieties, emphasizing again the importance of absolute certainty before eating any wild fungi. In a clearing, you find a stand of Jerusalem artichokes, a native sunflower with edible tubers that taste somewhat like potatoes when cooked. Digging them requires effort, but the yield is worth it. Dozens of knobby white tubers that will add substantial nutrition to meals in the days ahead. The real prize comes late in the afternoon when someone spots a wild plum tree, its branches heavy with small, ripe fruit. Everyone rushes over, reaching up to pick the plums, collecting them in skirts, hats, anything that will hold them. The fruit is tart but edible raw and will be even better cooked into a sauce or dried for future use. The return to camp is triumphal, everyone laden with foraged foods of various kinds. The hunting party arrives around the same time, with actual game for once, 2 deer that will provide much-needed fresh meat and, just as importantly, fat that has been largely absent from the diet in recent weeks. The camp erupts into activity as the evening meal preparations begin on a larger scale than usual. The deer are butchered with careful attention to using every part. Meat for immediate consumption, some cut into strips for jerky, organs and less desirable cuts going into a communal stew pot. Even the bones will be used for broth, the marrow a rare source of concentrated nutrition. Some of the women begin processing the wild plums, sorting them for different uses. The ripest will be eaten fresh or cooked into sauce. Others will be sliced and laid on cloths to dry in the sun tomorrow. Nothing is wasted. Even the pits will be saved for their small almond-like kernels that can be extracted, leached of their bitter compounds, and ground for flour in truly desperate times. The Jerusalem artichokes are scrubbed and roasted in the coals of the fire, their skins blackening while the interiors become soft and sweet. The wild greens are washed and prepared in various ways, some boiled simply with a bit of salt, others mixed with the abundant mushrooms and wild onions for a more complex dish. The resulting dinner is the most varied and satisfying since the journey began. There's venison roasted over the fire, its rich aroma making mouths water before the first bite is taken. The meat is lean but flavourful, a welcome change from salt pork and dried beef. The Jerusalem artichokes provide a starchy base similar to potatoes, while the wild greens and mushrooms add variety and nutrition. For dessert, there's wild plum sauce, tart and sweet, a shock of fruit flavour after so long without. The mood around the fires is almost festive as people eat. Conversations flow easily. Laughter is heard for the first time in days. Even those who have been most affected by the journey's hardships seem to revive somewhat with the better food and the day of rest. Children play at the edges of the firelight, their energy restored by adequate nourishment for once. After dinner, as darkness settles completely over the valley, the talk turns to food preservation, a critical task for the day ahead. With such unexpected abundance, it's essential to preserve as much as possible for the remaining journey. Plans are made for smoking the venison that won't be eaten immediately, drying the wild fruits and preparing the various plants for travel. Someone mentions pemmican, that concentrated mixture of dried meat, rendered fat and berries that Silas described days earlier, with the deer providing both meat and fat and the wild berries adding sweetness and nutrition. It's an ideal opportunity to prepare this travel food that has sustained native peoples and trappers for generations. Silas offers to demonstrate the process tomorrow, explaining that properly made pemmican can last for months or even years without spoiling. Pound the dried meat to almost powder, he reiterates. Mix it with melted fat and those dried berries. Form it into cakes or balls. Best travel food there is. Light to carry, but full of what your body needs. As the evening progresses, the conversation shifts naturally to the settlement that awaits at journey's end. The successful foraging has reminded everyone that the land provides for those who understand it, who work with its natural cycles and bounty rather than fighting against them. The knowledge gained during today's gathering will be valuable not just for the remaining journey, but for the years of frontier life ahead. Rebecca, the woman who made this journey before, describes how her family gradually learned the seasonal rhythms of wild foods in their new home. Spring brings the first greens, she says. When you're desperate for anything fresh after winter, come summer, there's berries of all kinds if you know where to look. Fall has nuts and late fruits. Even winter has its offerings if you know how to find them. The natives knew all this, of course, had been living with the land for generations before we came. This mention of native knowledge leads to a discussion of relationships with the indigenous peoples of the region. Some settlers have had positive experiences trading and learning from their native neighbours. Others tell stories of tension or conflict. But almost everyone acknowledges the depth of indigenous understanding of local food sources, knowledge that could mean the difference between survival and starvation for newcomers to the territory. As the fires burn lower and the hour grows late, people begin to drift away to their bedrolls, tired but satisfied in a way they haven't been for days. The valley has provided a brief respite, a chance to regain strength and supplies before the final push to their destination. Tomorrow will be another day of rest and preparation, then the journey continues. You find your own spot for sleeping, spreading your blankets on soft grass beneath a cottonwood tree. The night is mild, stars visible through the branches overhead. Your stomach feels pleasantly full for the first time in recent memory, the varied meal satisfying in a way that basic trail rations never could be. As you settle into your bedroll, you realise that today has been more than just a successful foraging expedition. It's been a glimpse of the life that awaits, not the initial hardships of establishing a homestead, but the eventual relationship with the land that sustains you. Today, you've begun to see the landscape not just as terrain to be crossed, but as a living source of nourishment for those who learn its secrets. Sleep comes easily, your body relaxing into the earth beneath you, your mind quiet with contentment rather than racing with hunger and worry. The sound of the river provides a gentle backdrop to your dreams of abundance now, of gardens and orchards, of tables laden with food grown by your own hands in the new land that lies just days ahead. The second day in the valley dawns clear and mild, sunlight filtering through the cottonwood leaves above your bedroll. For a moment, waking feels like being back home. The soft ground beneath you instead of rocky trail, bird songs instead of creaking wagon wheels, the peaceful rush of the river instead of the constant anxieties of the journey. But reality returns quickly as your stomach reminds you of the precarious food situation despite yesterday's abundance. Camp stirs to life around you, the morning routine familiar after months on the trail. Fires are built up from banked coals, coffee brewed, still mostly dandelion root, but welcome nonetheless. Breakfast preparations begin, using some of yesterday's bounty. The remaining fish is flaked and mixed with wild greens, and the last handful of cornmeal to make patties that are fried in precious deer fat rendered overnight. The result is more flavourful than anything you've eaten for breakfast in weeks. As you eat, the wagon master outlines the day's tasks. This second rest day is not just for recuperation, but for intensive food gathering and preservation. Every bit of extra food could make the difference in the final push to the settlement. Teams form organically, some to continue hunting and fishing, others to gather wild foods, still others to process and preserve what's already been collected. You join Silas's group, curious about the pemmican he promised to demonstrate. The old trapper has already set up a work area near one of the fires, various ingredients arranged neatly on a clean cloth. The deer meat not needed for immediate consumption has been sliced thin and is drying on racks constructed from green branches. Won't be fully dried by the time we leave, Silas explains, examining the meat strips with a critical eye, but far enough along to finish drying as we travel. The key is getting it thin enough to dry quick, but not so thin it burns. He shows you the process for making pemmican, starting with some previously dried meat he carries in his own supplies. The dried meat is placed in a clean cloth and pounded with a smooth riverstone until it breaks down into small fibres, almost a powder. This is mixed with rendered deer fat that has cooled to a soft consistency but isn't fully hardened. Equal parts meat and fat, he explains, working the mixture with experienced hands. Some folks use more fat in cold weather, keeps your body fueled better. Then add dried berries if you've got 'em, about half as much as the meat. Wild blackberries and strawberries gathered yesterday have been drying in the sun, and though not completely desiccated, they're dry enough to add to the mixture. Silas works them in, the dark berry juice staining the light-coloured mixture with streaks of purple and red. Now form it into cakes, he demonstrates, shaping the mixture into a small, dense patty about the size of his palm. Or into balls, if you prefer. Let it firm up, wrap it in cloth or hide. It'll keep for months, even years if you make it right, Kit. You try your hand at the process, finding the work satisfying despite its simplicity. The resulting pemmican isn't beautiful, a mottled mixture of meat, fat, and berries, but Silas assures you it's some of the most nutritious trail food possible, concentrated calories and protein that will sustain energy during hard travel. Throughout the day, similar preservation activities continue around camp. The plums gathered yesterday are laid out on cloths to dry in the sun, arranged in a single layer to dry evenly. Jerusalem artichokes are peeled, sliced thin, and set to dry as well. A starchy staple that will reconstitute reasonably well in soups and stews. The hunters return mid-morning with more game, not deer this time, but several rabbits and a wild turkey. Not as much meat as yesterday's deer, but still valuable protein. The turkey is particularly appreciated, its meat less lean than the rabbits, providing more of the fat that bodies crave during hard travel. Fishing continues to be successful, with a steady stream of trout being cleaned and prepared. Some are cooked immediately for the midday meal, others salted lightly and hung to smoke over low fires. The smoke not only helps preserve the fish, but adds flavour that makes even trail-weary appetites perk up. The foraging parties return with an impressive variety of wild foods, more greens and roots, wild grapes from a vine discovered climbing a tree near the river, and best of all, a large patch of ground cherries, their paper-like husks containing small, sweet fruits that taste like a cross between tomatoes and pineapples. The midday meal is again a celebration of abundance. Fresh fish, rabbit stew with wild onions and Jerusalem artichokes, foraged greens dressed with a bit of rendered fat for flavour and sustenance. There's even a simple dessert of ground cherries, their bright, unexpected flavour causing delighted surprise among those who've never tasted them before. After the meal, preservation work continues with increased urgency. Tomorrow the wagon train moves on, and everything gathered must either be eaten or prepared for travel. The smoked fish is wrapped in cloths and packed away. Pemmican production continues under Silas's direction, with more people learning the technique. The partially dried fruits are carefully packed so they can continue drying during travel without being crushed. By late afternoon, you find yourself in a small group with Martha, the woman who's become something of a mentor during the journey. She's teaching several younger women, including you, how to identify and gather medicinal plants, knowledge that will be valuable not just for the remaining journey, but for life in the settlement ahead. "This here is yarrow," she says, pointing out a plant with feathery leaves and small white flower clusters. "Good for fever and wounds. And over there's willow. The bark makes a tea for pain, works similar to the white man's aspirin." You move through the meadow and along the riverbank, learning to recognize plants that can heal as well as nourish. Martha emphasizes the importance of absolute certainty in identification, just as Silas did with mushrooms. "Many healing plants have poisonous lookalikes," she warns. Nature provides the cure, but she tests whether you're paying proper attention. The knowledge feels empowering, another way of reading the landscape, of finding what you need in the wilderness. You gather samples of the plants Martha identifies, wrapping them carefully in your handkerchief to study later. Some are familiar from back east, others entirely new to you. As the sun begins to lower toward the western hills, everyone returns to camp for the evening meal and final preparations for tomorrow's departure. The mood is both satisfied and slightly anxious. Satisfied with the successful gathering of these 2 days, anxious about the journey still ahead. Dinner is another celebration of the valley's bounty. Turkey roasted over the fire, its skin crisp and golden. More of the Jerusalem artichokes mashed with wild onions, greens sautéed in turkey fat, and a sauce of wild plums, tart and sweet against the savoury meat. It's a feast by trail standards, though portions remain modest to ensure leftovers for tomorrow's travel. After dinner, as darkness settles over the valley, the wagon master calls a meeting to discuss the days ahead. Maps are spread out in the firelight, the route traced with a weathered finger as he outlines what to expect. From here, we've got about 12 days of travel, assuming good weather and no major delays, he explains. The trail follows the river for 3 days, then cuts across open country for another 4 before reaching the last mountain range, smaller than what we've already crossed, but still challenging. After that, it's 5 days through rolling hills to the settlement. He looks up from the maps, his face serious in the flickering light. Our food situation is better than it was before we reached this valley, but still precarious. We'll need to continue gathering as we travel, hunting when possible. The river section should provide good fishing, and there's forage along the way. Once we leave the river, it gets harder. Everyone nods, understanding the reality. Despite the temporary abundance of these 2 days, the fundamental situation hasn't changed. They are travellers in a vast wilderness, carrying limited supplies, dependent on their own resourcefulness and the land's provision for survival. The wagon master continues. "We leave at first light. Get a good night's rest. The trail ahead isn't easy, but we've come too far to falter now. The settlement awaits, and with it, the new lives you've journeyed so far to build." With that, the meeting breaks up, people returning to their individual camps to make final preparations for tomorrow's departure. A different kind of energy runs through the camp now, not the desperate determination of the mountain crossing, but a renewed sense of purpose of the journey's end finally within realistic reach. You check your own preparations, making sure the wild foods you've gathered are properly packed, your personal belongings secure in the wagon, your bedroll ready for quick packing in the morning. The activities feel different somehow. The routines are the same as they've been for months, but there's a sense of approaching conclusion, of a chapter about to end and another about to begin. As you settle into your bedroll for the last night in this sheltered valley, you find yourself thinking not of the trail ahead, but of the settlement that awaits. What will it be like? How will you create a home there, establish food sources, become part of a new community? The questions are both exciting and daunting. Sleep comes with surprising ease, your body still benefiting from the rest days and better food. Your dreams are vivid but peaceful, visions of a small cabin with a garden behind it, smoke rising from the chimney, the imagined smell of bread baking in your own oven, rather than over a campfire. In the dream, your hands are in rich soil, planting seeds, the tactile sensation so real you can almost feel the dirt under your fingernails. Morning arrives with a chill that penetrates your blankets, pulling you reluctantly from sleep. The sky is still dark, but the eastern horizon shows the first faint lightening of dawn. Around you, the camp is already stirring. The wagon master meant what he said about leaving at first light. Breakfast is quick and simple, leftover turkey and bread from yesterday, eaten standing up as the final packing commences. The wagons are loaded, oxen hitched, fires doused. With surprising swiftness, the temporary community that occupied this valley for 2 days disappears, leaving only flattened grass and cold fire rings to show they were ever there. The wagon train moves out just as the sun crests the eastern ridge, its light catching the moving caravan and casting long shadows across the valley floor. There's a reluctance in leaving this place of temporary abundance, but also anticipation for the journey's end now visible on the horizon. The first day back on the trail follows the river, making travel relatively easy. The fishing continues to be good, with lines cast during brief rest stops yielding enough for the evening meal. Foraging happens on the move. Edible plants spotted along the trail quickly gathered and added to the communal cooking pots. By the second day, a routine is established. The wagon train moves steadily, covering good distance each day. Food is gathered opportunistically. Fish from the river, small game when hunters are lucky, wild plants continuously. The supplies from the valley help, but are carefully rationed, saved for days when fresh food is scarce. The weather holds, almost suspiciously perfect. Clear skies, moderate temperatures, no rain to turn the trail to mud or swell the river to dangerous levels. Weather luck, the old-timers call it, a rare blessing on the trail west. On the fourth day, as predicted, the trail leaves the river, turning west across open country. The landscape changes, fewer trees, more rolling grassland stretching to distant hills. Water becomes a concern again, each stream and pond noted carefully on the maps. The day's travel planned around these vital stopping points. Game is more visible in this open country, but also more wary, harder to approach within rifle range. The hunting parties have mixed success, some days returning with pronghorn or deer, other days empty-handed. Wild plants are less abundant away from the river, requiring more careful searching during rest stops. The pemmican proves its worth now, a small portion providing sustained energy during long days of travel. The concentrated mixture of protein, fat and berries is oddly satisfying despite its simple nature. You find yourself grateful for Silas's teaching, for the knowledge that helps extend meagre supplies. The second mountain crossing, while less dramatic than the first, brings its own challenges. The trail climbs steadily for 2 days, the wagons moving slower as the oxen strain against the incline. Temperatures drop with the elevation gain, nights becoming genuinely cold. Extra blankets are pulled from storage, fires built larger in the evening camps. Food becomes scarcer in the higher elevations. Fewer plants, less game. The wagon train relies heavily on the preserved foods from the valley and the dwindling supplies carried from the beginning. Meals become simpler again, portions more carefully measured. Hunger returns as a constant companion, though not as desperate as before the valley rest. The descent from the second mountain range brings a return to more abundant country, forests with game, meadows with edible plants, streams with fish. The foraging and hunting improve, supplementing the basic rations enough to keep everyone moving forward with reasonable strength. And then, almost suddenly, you're in the final stretch. 5 days of travel through rolling hills that gradually give way to more settled country. Signs of the pioneer settlement appear, crude roads rather than just trails, occasional rough cabins, land cleared for planting. The landscape bears the mark of human presence, of the civilization you've journeyed so far to join. On the afternoon of the 11th day after leaving the valley, the wagon master calls a halt on a ridge overlooking a broad valley. Below, visible in the clear autumn light, lies the settlement, a collection of log cabins and frame houses, smoke rising from chimneys, fields surrounding the central cluster of buildings. It's not large, certainly nothing like the towns back east, but after months of wilderness it looks like a metropolis. A cheer goes up from the wagon train, people embracing, some weeping with relief and emotion. The journey isn't quite over. There's still half a day's travel to reach the settlement proper, but the destination is literally in sight, the goal almost achieved. The final camp is made with a festive air despite the continuing food limitations. Tomorrow will bring the end of trail life, the beginning of settlement. People share addresses and arrangements. Some have family already in the settlement. Others have purchased land sight unseen. Still, others will stay in the town until they decide where to establish their homesteads. The morning of the final day dawns clear and cool, perfect early autumn weather. Breakfast is whatever remains of the personal supplies. For some a feast, for others barely a mouthful. But it hardly matters now, with the settlement so close. The wagons are packed one last time, oxen hitched, the familiar routine carried out with new energy. The approach to the settlement takes on a ceremonial quality, the wagon train forming a more orderly procession as it descends from the hills into the valley. Word has spread of their arrival. People emerge from the cabins and buildings, gathering along the crude main street to welcome the newcomers. There's a surprising formality to the welcome, the settlement's leaders stepping forward to greet the wagon master, introduce themselves to the new arrivals. Behind them, other settlers stand ready with practical assistance, places to stay for those without immediate accommodations, help with unhitching and caring for the exhausted animals, and most wonderfully, food. A community meal has been prepared to welcome the wagon train, tables set up outside the small church, laden with dishes that seem impossibly luxurious after months of trail rations. Fresh bread still warm from ovens, butter churned from local cow's milk, preserves made from summer berries, roasted meats, vegetables from settlement gardens. It's overwhelming after so long with so little. You find yourself hesitant at first, taking only small portions despite your hunger, unused to such abundance. Around you, others from the wagon train show similar restraint, their bodies and minds not yet adjusted to the reality that the scarcity of the trail is over. The settlers encourage gently, understanding this transition from deprivation to relative plenty. The meal stretches into a celebration that lasts well into the evening. As darkness falls, lanterns are lit, music begins, a fiddle, a harmonica, voices joining in songs half forgotten during the long journey. There's dancing despite trail-weary bodies, laughter despite the exhaustion, a sense of community forming between established settlers and new arrivals. You find yourself sitting at one point with an older woman who introduces herself as one of the settlement's first residents, arriving 5 years earlier. The first year is the hardest, she tells you, echoing what you've heard from others who made this journey before. But you've already survived the trail, and that's no small thing. The same strength will see you through what comes next. She offers practical advice about establishing food sources quickly, which crops to plant first, how to preserve the harvest, where to find wild foods in the surrounding countryside to supplement what you grow. We help each other here, she explains. Have to in a place like this. No one makes it entirely on their own. The following days bring a whirlwind of activity as you and the other new arrivals begin establishing yourselves in the settlement. Some move directly to land already purchased, beginning the hard work of clearing and building. Others, including you, arrange temporary accommodations in town while exploring the surrounding area for the right place to homestead. Food is no longer the desperate concern it was on the trail, but it remains a central preoccupation. The settlement has enough to share with newcomers through the immediate transition, but winter is approaching and everyone needs to contribute to the community stores. Those with skills find ways to work for their keep: carpentry, blacksmithing, sewing, teaching. You offer help with the ongoing harvest, working in other settlers' fields in exchange for a share of the crops. Within a month, you found your land, a promising piece with good water, some open ground for immediate planting, and forest for building material and firewood. With help from neighbours, already you think of the other settlers that way, a simple one-room cabin rises over the course of 3 intense weeks of labour. It's crude by Eastern standards, with a dirt floor and a roof that will likely leak in heavy rain, but it's shelter against the approaching winter. Food preparations become increasingly urgent as the days shorten and temperatures drop. The community organises hunting parties, bringing in deer, elk, and other game to be processed and preserved. Smoke houses run constantly, the aroma of curing meat hanging in the autumn air. Root cellars are stocked with potatoes, carrots, turnips, and other vegetables that will keep through the cold months. You learn from the experienced settlers, helping with the work and absorbing the knowledge you'll need for your own first year. The skills gained during the journey, foraging, preservation, making do with limited ingredients, prove valuable even in the relative abundance of the settlement. Nothing is wasted, every resource used to its fullest. The first snow falls in early November, earlier than you expected, a sharp reminder of nature's power in this new land. The settlement turns inward, social gatherings moving from outdoors to cabin hearths, work shifting from field to indoor tasks. Food becomes simpler as fresh ingredients dwindle. Preserved meats, stored vegetables, dried fruits, bread from precious flour. Your own cabin is snug enough, the dirt floor covered with woven rush mats, the fire kept burning to ward off the increasing cold. You've managed to stock a small supply of food, not as much as the more established settlers, but enough to get through winter with careful rationing and community support. The pemmican-making skills learned from Silas prove useful again, turning the meat from your share of the hunting into concentrated nutrition for the month ahead. Winter deepens, snow piling higher, temperatures dropping to levels you never experienced back east. The settlement maintains its communal spirit through the dark months, shared meals to conserve resources, rotating gatherings in different cabins to save firewood, collective projects like quilting and tool repair that benefit from many hands. Food remains central to both survival and social connection. Recipes are shared, adaptations to available ingredients discussed and refined. You learn how to make bread stretch further by adding boiled and mashed potatoes to the dough, how to extract maximum flavour from soup bones by roasting them before boiling, how to preserve the last precious eggs from hens that have mostly stopped laying until spring. The Christmas celebration is modest by Eastern standards but feels abundant after the privations of the trail. The community pools resources for a feast, a few chickens and a pig butchered for the occasion, hoarded dried fruits transformed into simple pies, precious sugar used for cookies and candies for the children. There are gifts too, mostly handmade and practical, knitted socks, carved wooden utensils, jars of preserves saved for the occasion. January brings the deepest cold, days when venturing outside becomes dangerous, nights when the fire must be maintained regardless of how precious the firewood. Food supplies dwindle despite careful rationing, and by February, many in the settlement are eating what one old-timer calls scraping meals. The bottom of barrels, the last preserved goods, whatever can be found or made from dwindling stores. You experience genuine hunger again, though different from the trail hunger, less immediate and desperate, more a persistent background discomfort. The community continues to share what remains, ensuring that no one goes without entirely, but portions grow smaller, meals simpler. Bread becomes a luxury, meat rare, vegetables limited to what remains in root cellars. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the change begins. Days lengthen, temperatures moderate, the massive snowdrifts start to recede, revealing the ground beneath. By March, the first green shoots appear in protected spots, wild onions, early greens, signs of the renewal to come. The settlement emerges from cabins like bears from hibernation, blinking in the strengthening sunlight, eager for fresh air and activity after the long confinement. There's work to be done immediately. Repairs to buildings damaged by winter storms, preparation of fields for planting, assessment of livestock that has survived the cold months. Food sources expand gradually. Hunting improves as animals become more active. Fishing resumes in streams freed from ice. Foraging begins for early spring plants. The hunger eases, though true abundance remains distant until crops can be planted and harvested. On your own land, you begin the real work of establishing a homestead. With help from neighbours, trees are felled and cleared, the ground broken for a garden, seeds saved from the previous year's harvest, a precious currency, shared and traded among settlers to ensure everyone has something to plant. You set aside a portion of your small remaining food stores as seed for the future, potatoes with eyes sprouting, dried beans that will go into the ground rather than the cooking pot, grain that represents next winter's bread rather than this spring's meals. The labour is intense, every muscle protesting after the relative inactivity of winter, but there's satisfaction in it too, in hands in the soil, in the neat rows of a planted garden, in the cabin improvements that make it more of a home. This is what you came west for. Not just to arrive, but to build, to create something that didn't exist before. As spring advances into summer, the settlement transforms. Gardens flourish in the fertile soil, livestock multiplies, new cabins rise as more pioneers arrive. Your own place takes shape, the garden producing its first tender vegetables, fruit trees planted that won't bear for years, but represent faith in the future, a proper floor replacing the dirt, a second room added for comfort and privacy. Food returns to abundance, the hunger of winter becoming a memory rather than a reality. Fresh greens, early peas and beans, new potatoes dug carefully from around the plants, eggs from chickens productive again in the longer days. The community continues to share and support each other, but with less desperate necessity, more neighbourly goodwill. A year has passed since you left Independence, Missouri, to journey west. The anniversary is marked with quiet reflection rather than celebration, a moment to consider how far you've come, not just in miles, but in experience and capability. You're not the same person who boarded that wagon train, just as this piece of land is not the same as it was when you first claimed it. The transformations continue, both of the land and yourself. Each season brings new challenges and rewards, new skills to master, new understandings of this place you now call home. The food journey evolves from basic survival to sustainable living, from what can we eat today to how can we ensure food for years to come. And in this evolution, you carry forward the lessons of the trail, the value of every morsel, the importance of community, the knowledge that hunger can always return with drought or crop failure or harsh winter. The abundance of good years is appreciated deeply because of the scarcity. You've known the food on your table precious because you understand exactly what it takes to produce it. This is the pioneer experience, not just the journey west, but the transformation that follows, the building of a life from raw materials, the creation of home in wilderness. The food that sustains this life becomes more than mere sustenance. It's a daily connection to the land, to the seasons, to the community that survives and thrives together in this new world.